We are now recording, just so you know. I like to tell you that. Most people seem to have their cameras off just now, but it's always nice just to tell you, just in case it switches on and you appear and you've forgotten to do your hair or something like that. So I want to save you that embarrassment. Hopefully that I noticed that my tunes kind of got a little bit kind of like up tempo there in the middle of it. So I was at one point in my life a wannabe DJ. So I think now I'm just, you're now my audience. So God knows where this will go by the end of next Friday. But anyway, so welcome along for session 3. If you've not tuned in to one of these before, my name is Brian Costello and I run a company called Headstrong. And as I said, and I will say on all of them, I'm not necessarily going to give myself a big introduction because I'd rather use the time for actually getting into some of the detail of what we're going to talk about. But if you want to know more about me, then all the sessions are recorded and you can go back on to session 1 and find out a little bit about my story and how I ended up here. So just so that you know, because we've had a couple of questions as well, that all of the sessions are being recorded and they're being put up on the SAIC YouTube channel, which if you let us know, we'll post a link to, and everybody should be able to find it. But it's the Scottish Aquaculture Innovation Centre. I had to make sure I get the name right there, so I'm just reading it. But if you look for that, I was going to mess it up there, Scottish Aquaculture Innovation Centre YouTube, then you'll find them on there, and they're even getting like nice intro screens and all sorts of stuff on them. So it's a lovely job, and they're up there in their entirety for you to watch whenever you want. So maybe if something gets said in one of these sessions that you think, okay, that's really interesting concept, I'd like to think about that a little bit more, you can reflect back, you can jump just to that little section, and you can see how it goes. So we are on session 3 today, and just so that you know, in the first 2 sessions, what we talked about was a little bit about how our brains function. What is it that happens inside our minds? How does our minds filter reality? What is normal, for instance? These types of things. We've started to discuss the concept of these different things. We talked in the first one about how thoughts cause feelings, and about how when we are looking, apologies by the way if I'm flicking in and out, I'm hoping that I shouldn't be very much, but apologies if I'm going to put the chat up just so that I can see. If for any reason, if I do freeze completely, if you let me know, I can't quite tell, but it kind of come up, but it seems to have gone at the moment, and I'm hoping that I can keep this connection going as much as I can. I've been having Wi-Fi issues. I'm getting a new router on Monday. I've got to admit, my broadband company have been pretty good about trying to sort me out. So there's a brand new router coming on Monday. Anyway, so I'm trying to remember. Yeah, so we were talking about thoughts cause feelings. And then on Wednesday, what we talked about is how our mind is almost a filter. It's like a bubble, and how this bubble is filtering our reality, where we're ignoring certain things and we're missing certain things that are happening, where we're twisting our reality to make it fit our belief systems and what it is that we want. And also we're making assumptions based on our experience and saying, well, if this happened here and this happened here. Now, sometimes this works really well for us, and sometimes it doesn't so much. And what we're going to do today is we're going to expand on that. You know, we have this bubble. So if you imagine this bubble, the skin of a bubble, and the question is, well, where does that come from? How is it made? And can we have a look at how it's made to the point where we can start to look at ourselves and go, well, that makes sense. When we start to look at our history and go, oh, so it was my mother's fault all along. Well, no, we're not going to get to that. I promise it's not your mum's fault. Although she might have had something to do with it, but we'll get into that. She might have developed you into being a fine and upstanding and fantastic person, as well as anything else that you might have mummy issues-wise. But anyway, so let me start today, though, a little unusually, by telling you a bit of a story. Now, it's a story about a girl that I once knew many, many years ago. And this girl had a very interesting experience when she was growing up. It's going to be relevant into what we're going to talk about a little bit later on. And what happened was that as she was growing up, she got to 4th year. Now, 4th year in Scottish schools is around about 15. I know many of you will know that, but I know we're talking to an international community here. So it's about 15 years old. It's the first year where you have to sit exams. And it's also the first year where perhaps, you know, that you have the responsibility where actually you could leave school at the end of it. Now, at the end of this year in school of 4th year, normally I think that's year 10, by the way, in England, and I don't know internationally. But what happened was that she was given a school report, as you would get from your teachers. And this school report said on it that she would achieve exactly what she deserved from life, i.e. nothing. Now, just think about that for a second. It's a very different time in teaching, I must admit, when this report was given, but still, there's motivation and support from an educational professional for you. She will achieve exactly what she deserves from life, i.e. nothing. Now, the reason that actually, or what had happened, was that she had put quite a lot of work in, and she put a fair bit of work in, but there was a lot of distractions. This can happen in our lives when we're 15 years old. You know, there was things happening at home. There was just things happening socially. There was a lot going on, and a lot of it, and some of it, relatively big stuff. And then, you know, we get this, she gets this report. So she decides to stay on for another year in school. And in Scotland, there's another set of exams that can be done at that point. And she works really hard. But yeah, again, she doesn't quite get the results that she's going to be getting. Now, she doesn't get a nasty report this time, but she doesn't quite get the results that she's looking for. What happens at the end of this year, though, is that she comes up with a decision inside her head. Now, it had been started a year before, and that's why it's relevant to what we're going to talk about today. Her bubble became tuned. And what did her bubble become tuned to? The fact that she was obviously, because she put a lot of work in and hadn't got the results. So she'd felt as if she'd put a lot of work in and hadn't got the results. So therefore, she must be stupid. It must be that. She just mustn't have the intelligence to be able to do what it is that she wants to do. Now, in mixing with that, also, that basically what she should do, and I'm going to use I think it's a kind of British phrase here. Again, I don't know where everybody's from, but to use a little bit more of a British phrase, is that she should stay in her lane. Basically, what I mean by that is that she should accept where she comes from, who she is, and that that's just who she is, and she should stop having aspirations to be anything more than this. And that's how she basically lived her life. As she grew up, she had a variety of jobs. And in fact, when I first met her, she was working for McDonald's restaurants, like McDonald's, the hamburger restaurants. And I was working there too. Although I was somewhere else, but we kind of knew each other just very vaguely through these types of things. And this was pretty much it. What happened was that she decided that even though, excuse me, she was working very hard, that was what she did. She worked very hard, but she should never really think that that's going to lead her anywhere because it didn't at school. She'd become stuck in, again, what I'm going to call a normal, which we're going to spend a whole lesson on Wednesday next week. So she becomes stuck in this normal, this idea that basically what's happening is that this is just the way that it is. And then what happens one day is that much further on than that, she goes for lunch. And she goes for just a family lunch. And she's sitting around a table when she says words that will change her life forever. And what she says is, just casually, because this is how it works inside her head, as she says, people like me don't go to university. Now, they're interesting words, aren't they? I mean, they say a lot about how somebody's bubble might be functioning. You know, like, people like me don't go to university is ultimately a belief system. Now, you think about you. Where was it that you got inspired to end up doing what you now do? Maybe you're one of those people, sorry, my tea bag's in the way, and you're now thinking, why is his tea bag still in the tea? It's peppermint tea, everything's okay. I'm not that strange that I have tea, normal tea with my tea bag still in. Anyway, why am I talking about my tea? So I'm just trying to clear my throat here. So basically, how was it that you became inspired to go to university? Did you fall into it? Was it something that just happened? When you think about things like even potentially bigger things in life, you know, I don't know what you believe about yourself, for instance. I don't know what you believe about you. Do you believe that you're good enough? Do you believe that you're really good at what you do? Where did that happen? When you think about the type of person that you believe you are, you know, maybe you believe you're really friendly, or you're funny, or that you're quite charismatic, or maybe you're somebody who's a little bit quieter, a wee bit more reserved, but you're studious and you're super organized. All of these things had to start somewhere. And this is the beginnings of your bubble. You know, when you're born ultimately a blank slate. You're born as this little creature that basically is just here. You have two fears. Those two fears are a fear of falling and a fear of loud noises. As any of you that are parents will know, actually, again, I don't know if it happens across the world, but I know in the UK, they actually will test your babies on that reflex of falling to make sure that their hands go back, and they'll kind of drop them on the bed to make sure, because I think it shows some vitamin deficiency or something like that. So we're born with these things, and then we begin to be programmed ultimately. Now, there was an amazing sociologist by the name of Massey, and he did a lot of work in this area, and I love it. Now, there's lots and lots of models of how we mature and how we grow. This is just one of them. I'm not saying it's the right one. I'm just saying this is one that I like, and I think that it really, for me, makes sense. And when I look at the clients that I work with, when I work with young people especially, I love to work with young people, but even when I work with adults, I can tell that I can see these periods, as I call them, the Massey periods, kind of going through people's lives. So what are the Massey periods? Well, first of all, and he puts them into 7-year blocks. You have from birth until 7 years old. For the Scottish people on here, that's up till about primary 3. And what happens is that in that 0 to 7, what we learn is the rules. So ultimately, we are born blank, and now we have to go, right, how does this all work? You know, at first we have to even learn how to walk and talk and do all those social functions first. But then ultimately we then have to learn how do friendships work. So, you know, I don't know what house you grew up in, but you've more than likely been influenced by some very early imprint experiences. And this is what this is called, the imprint period. Imprint experiences from early on in life. And for instance, how you deal with things socially. If you grew up in a house, for instance, where there was just a revolving door, you know, of aunties and uncles and grandparents and friends just constantly going through, where your mum and dad entertained all the time, and, you know, there was always people there, always adults around or cousins around or things like that, that will have shaped you. In the same way as if you were maybe an only child and you grew up in a very quiet house in a very, very small family, that can also have shaped you. Now, I can't say how it's shaped you, because ultimately you might be somebody that goes, oh yeah, my mum and dad were really social when I was younger, so now I have 5 million friends and I'm always having dinner parties. Then again, you might go, oh, my mum and dad always had people over and it did my head in. I hated it. And now who you are is somebody that's quite happy to have one friend over once a year. And even then, the timing is very efficient. And at 11 o'clock, you leave because I want my own space back. And that might be who you are. And of course, the opposite applies to maybe if you grew up in a quiet household. Now, this is just one example of how the imprint experience works. But ultimately, what you're doing here is you're looking around you, big wide eyes, like a just open child, and you're learning the rules. Then what happens? At 7 years old, up until around about 14 years old, things change. All of a sudden, I'm going to sneeze. Sorry about that. I need drinks of tea. I'm sneezing. I don't know what's going on here at all. Anyway, so then what happens is 7 to 14 happens. And we call this the modeling period. And what we're looking for in the modeling period is we're looking for role models. So we've learned from mum and dad or whoever it was that brings you up. And then what you do is you start looking out and you go, right, you guys are brilliant. I like you. Well, not all the time, but let's just imagine. But you guys are great. But who else is out there? Like, why do I have to go to bed at 8 o'clock when Mark over there goes to bed at 10:30 and Abigail over there doesn't go to bed at all and just walks around like this all the time, because actually her mum and dad don't even have a bedtime, and they say that she can stay up until whenever she wants to. So ultimately we start to realize that our normal maybe isn't normal. Now, from a mental health perspective, this creates a bit of a rock, because sometimes this is the first points around about 7 years old for many people, is about the first time that we start to realize that what we've accepted isn't actually really how it is for everyone. So for example, classic example of this, somebody that grows up in a single parent family, that it's just mum all the time, or it's just dad all the time, that's just normal, that's just normal. Why does her daddy stay with her? Why does her mummy still stay in the house? And you start to notice at 7 years old, you start to realize that the world maybe doesn't have a normal. And you start asking yourself, well, do I want that, or am I happy with this? But then what you start to find is your role models, and you go, I want to be like you. You find a teacher that influences you and inspires you. You find a relative, perhaps, which could again be your mum, dad, big sisters, big brothers, cousins. It could be anybody that you look at and you go, that's who I want to be. I remember being massively influenced by my Uncle Chris, my mum's brother, my mum's older brother. And he was into, he would probably, I'm trying to think, he was probably about 30 odd, probably about 30-ish as I was hitting this period, maybe coming into his very late 30s, early 40s. He's now 70 something, I don't know exactly. But he drove the best cars, like he had a Jaguar. And that for me was like, oh my God, he's got a Jag. It's like, and he had this really lovely house, that was really modern and new. And he listened to cool music like Dire Straits and Queen and Bruce Springsteen. And I loved all these things because my Uncle Chris, and I thought, he looks as if he's got his stuff together. So I'm basically going to follow whatever he does. I wonder who yours were. Who were your role models at that time? But in the flip side also, who were your anti-role models at that time? Who are the people that you looked at and went, I don't want to be anything like you, and I'm never going to be like you. And you potentially, if you think about it, you might still be moving away from being those types of people even now. It might even have been somebody, in fact, I was speaking to someone recently who was talking about an experience that they remembered when they were about 8 or 9. And this experience, I turned around to them and I was like, is that why when you got older, you wanted to be this? And they were like, I'd never thought of that. Yeah, do you know what? It probably is. This one experience that lived in their head still to this day, that actually was connected to decisions they made about their career. Not what they do now, but it was at that point. Now, if any of your parents, by the way, I'm hoping that you're sitting there going, that makes sense. That's exactly what happened. And now we get on to the big one. 14 to 21. So 14 to 21, the final Massey period, teenage years, is what Massey called socialization. Now, the way that I sum up socialization is you get what I call the 2 teen questions. So the 2 teenage questions, or as I call them, the 2 teen questions. And those 2 teen questions are, inside your mind, a voice begins to scream. And it is screaming at you, who am I and how do I fit in? So basically, you've grown up, with these people that you call parents, and all of a sudden you're going, thanks for all that. You're all right. I mean, I'm not saying you're fantastic, but you're okay. Now it's time for me to become me. What bits do I want to keep from what I've learned in my first 14 years? And what bits am I ready just to go, nah, ditch it. I don't want that anymore. That's not going to be me. That's not going to be my future. Who am I and how do I fit in? So now you're in socialization. So basically what you're looking for is a tribe. And what you'll find is that when you look at our teenage years, is that we were grown by the tribes we fitted in with. That's not to say that you're still with that tribe. And in fact, for many of you, you might have even found that you didn't meet your tribe until university. Now, this growing period, this final period of 14 to 21 is so critical to us growing up, because we ultimately are forming an identity. We're saying, this is who I believe I am. And this can create a whole heap of interesting shifts in terms of how we behave and who we are. If you're a parent, for instance, you might be finding that basically these experiences that you're having, if you're a parent of a teenager, is that all of a sudden they're not listening to you anymore. And the simple fact is because you don't fit in. And if you do, and you have to fit in. That doesn't mean get down with the kids and like start listening to like really cool music, you know, like Billie Eilish and stuff like that. Sitting there going, "Oh yes, man, I love this. You know, this hippity hop music. I love this. Is it rhythm and blues? Is that what you call it? Yeah. Oh yes, this is cool." I'm not suggesting at all that you try and get down with the kids. That's not what understanding is. It's about understanding on a level of emotion. But we can get into that another time. All I'm trying to show you is that these are the periods where we are created. And we come through these 3 periods. And the question is who are you when you come out the other end? At 21 years old, who are you? Now, some of you might be relatively young. I don't know. I don't know who's on the call. So some of you might not be that long out of this period. And actually, some psychologists have added in a 4th period, 21 to 28. They call it the career process. And the career process is what happens when actually we go out to work and we really start growing up. When we start to work out, what do I like? Who am I? You really fall in love. You start to settle down. You get your first house. You start to make a little bit of money. You start to be able to create some choices. It's like there's a bit of freedom. And what happens up until about 28 is you're just doing that final thing of now trying out everything you got in the first 21 years. Let's try it out in the world and see if it works. Test and measure. You guys are scientists. I'm sure it's like a big experiment, basically. You know, you go out there and you go, did that work? No, my thesis is now, no, I cannot like take that for the rest of my life. Some of you are like, why not? Why can't I like take that? I still like take that, even though there's only 3 of them. I think that's perfectly fine. Now, you know what I mean. So we go through these transformations. And ultimately what happens and how this happens, and this comes into an area of psychology called Gestalt, is that what it leaves behind is a row of memories. Now, when we started, and just before we started, I was sharing a screen with you. I was sharing this screen here. And I shared this screen with these little characters up at the top. And these little characters are the characters from a movie which I'm sure you've all watched. And if you've not, it's a movie called Inside Out by Pixar, Disney, whatever you want to call them. And the reason I put that up is because that comes into this 0 to 21 or 0 to 28 and you becoming you. Now, actually, they use 2 different types of psychology, and that I'm not going to bore you to tears with what they are, but one of them was a type of psychology called Gestalt. And Gestalt psychology is a model that basically says you are nurture. You are ultimately nurture more than nature. And I love that. I think there is some stuff that's nature. I think there's some genetic psychology in there. I'll give you that. Definitely exists. Maybe there's some big parts of it. But ultimately, we are, as a personality, a product of our upbringing. A product of the things that happened to us over time. And these things can change like that. You can have an experience today that changes who you think you are, changes the way that you see the world, changes how you think the world works. Because ultimately, we're always changing because we're always learning. And all learning is memories. Now, there's 2 different types of memory, and these are just names that I've given them, I must admit, but they're just generalizations about the types of memories that we can have. We can have big bangs. Now, these big bang memories are the things that come along and like, boom, and they hit us, and they're like, whoa, and you remember them forever. And some of that doesn't have to be massively important. A big bang doesn't have to be life-changing. I've got a memory, for instance, of being in, must have been about 8 years old and being in school. And I still remember a boy in my class. I still even remember his name. And this is a key to big bangs. His name was Kenneth. And Ken put his hand up, 8 years old, and a room full of boys. Can I just say it was all boys. It wasn't like a posh boys' school, but it was just the way that it was done back then in the 70s. Sometimes we still had boys' schools. And it was all boys. And Kenneth put his hand up and he said to the teacher, "Miss, I've got a sore tummy." And everybody laughed at him. And I was thinking, why is everybody laughing at him? He's got a sore tummy. But everybody was laughing because he said tummy. And we thought that we were men by that point. I don't know what it was meant to say instead. That still sticks in my head. And I remember it clearly. I can remember what the classroom looked like and everything. That's a big bang. Think back in time. Where are your big bangs? What shaped you? What are the moments that through life have shaped you? And some of them are brilliant and some of them are great moments. Some of them are just random memories that for some reason at the time must have been emotional to you, so you've remembered them. And some of them are the not so good moments, you know, things that have happened that you look back on and go, ugh. And this is where a lot of our mental health comes from. Now, I'll explain the other one and then I'll go back in the mental health thing. And we've got about 5 minutes to go, so we're doing okay. The other one, so we get a big bang, boom, and the other one is a drip feed. Just something that keeps on happening. Low level, almost quiet. They're the most dangerous ones. The ones that happen in the background that you hardly even notice are happening. You're like, is that a thing? You know, if any of you, for instance, and I'm sorry about this example, but I did say in week 1 that we'd sometimes use my Pookie Stack, where sometimes we'd talk about things that might make you go, ow, because we're talking about mental health. We can't avoid these things. If any of you have ever been involved in a relationship with a partner who was quite controlling, or if any of you, when you look back to school years, or maybe after that, have ever been bullied, these are drip feeds. I'm not saying that sometimes that wasn't like a big bang and these moments that you remember forever, but a lot of controlling and bullying behavior is actually very, very subtle. If you were to tell me about it, I'd probably go, yeah, it doesn't sound that big a deal in isolation, but multiply it by a year, 6 months, 5 years, 10 years, and all of a sudden it becomes significant. Now, on the flip side of this is also how you've learned most things in your life. This is what studying is. It's like drip feeds of information, just little bits of information layering up inside your head, getting bigger and bigger and bigger until such times as you've learned everything that you know now. If you think back to yourself and the you that left school, think about the you that left school, however many years ago that was, whether it was too many to think about or just not that many at all. You'll be a very different person now than the person you were then. There'll be traits that will have come through because of your role models and your parents and how you were brought up, the modeling that you did and the imprints that you have. There'll be parts of you that you adopted as a teenager, the friends, for instance, that might still be part of who you are. But there'll also be this kind of changes that have happened through these drip feeds and these big bangs even since. Now, from a mental health perspective, this is critical because what many people think is that they're broken. And what many people say to me about mental health is, I have anxiety issues. I'm broken. I'm just burst. My brain doesn't work like everybody else's. I'm not the same. And this is the way it's going to be forever. People say this about depression all the time. We even talk about depression as a disease, as an illness. You go to your doctor, you go to a GP in the UK and you say, by the way, I've got this. And this is true for anxiety and depression and other mental health challenges. They'll say, oh, you're going to have this for the rest of your life. I say, no, you're not, because you haven't had it for the rest of your life. You have learned how to have this problem. Now, I'm not saying that that's an easy thing, but you've learned to have it. And that might not be your choice. If it was bullying or controlling behavior, that thought that you're not good enough, for instance, which comes quite often from controlling and bullying behavior, that thought, if you, for the parents that are here, you want the recipe for a perfectionist? Do you want to make one? Do you want to try a wee experiment on your children? Please don't do this at home. Please don't take this. This isn't real advice, but you'll get my point in a wee minute. If you want to make a perfectionist, see every time they come home from school and they go, Mummy, Daddy, I got 9 out of 10 in the spelling test. Go, oh, which one did you get wrong? If they'd run in and they go, Mummy, Daddy, I got 2nd place today in the race. You go, oh, who won? Were you close to them? Oh, well, maybe next time, eh? When they come home and they say that they got whatever mark, always just ask them. Even if they got the top mark, then the other way to do it is to compare them to somebody else. Go, Mummy, Daddy, I got first. Oh, well, your sister got first. I mean, so she got first as well. Don't worry about it. I mean, it's not a big deal. And these little experiences can very, very easily make people feel as if they're not good enough. And this is happening for all mental health challenges. You're taught to be anxious. Again, maybe not through choice, maybe very unconsciously, where you're not even noticing, where we learn to be depressed. And my challenge is, what would happen if you could unlearn how to do that? I mean, literally, if you could unlearn it. Like, if you could go back just now to a time in your life where you could look back, go back and visit a younger you and say, can I just speak to you for a wee minute? But you know what I do now? I went to university and I loved it, and we got a degree, and we did this, and and all of these things have changed, and now we're in love, and we've got a family, and it's all going to be okay. I know you think that you're the geekiest, weirdest kid in the school, but actually you're going to find people who love you and care for you, and you're not going to be alone. And honestly, you're amazing as you are, and you're going to be even more amazing when you grow up. Just know it now that you're amazing, and stop feeling so bad about yourself. It's going to be, I promise it's all going to be okay. Imagine the opportunity to have that. Who would you go back to? Where would you go back to in your head to change your drip feed or your big bang? And I would recommend, by the way, as well, that you watch Inside Out, because you'll learn a lot about it through there. And interestingly, when that young lady said to the lunch table that day, she turned around and she said, people like me don't go to university. Actually, what somebody did was they turned around and they said, what does that mean? Like, who are people like you? And somebody challenged that belief. They challenged the bubble. And what it did was it rippled the bubble. It made the bubble change. And the bubble started to twist and shift. And that young lady actually did go to university. And she went to university, and because we're a wee bit over time, I'll rush the story through. Basically what happened was she went to university. She went to do a degree that she didn't think that she thought was going to take her down one route. And actually she asked the person when she went to do the degree, she said, is there much science in this degree? Now, it was all about health and all of these things. At one point, she decided she was going to maybe be a nurse or a midwife, but she had to go down this route. And the lecturer in the university said, no, not much science at all. Remember, this is a girl that thinks that she's stupid, so she's scared of science and all these like school-like things. She doesn't want, oh God, why would she do them? She's too stupid to do them. Well, she did start that degree, and there was a lot of science in it. And about a couple of years in, what happened was she met an amazing lecturer, and a lecturer who spoke about her subject with passion and with drive. And this young lady was like, oh, I love that. I want to do a little bit of that. And she started going down that route. And a couple of years later, this girl that went in thinking that she was stupid, thinking she couldn't do anything, she cried a lot, can I just say, through all of this. And there was a lot of challenges. Eventually walked out with a first-class honours in immunology and microbiology. And some of you, I'm sure, are marine biologists. Some of you have probably done bits of micro, and maybe you are a microbiologist who's just then specialised. But she walked out with a first-class honours, this girl that thought she was stupid. You guys will get this because I'm sure most of you have been to university, but for the last 2 years that she was at university, she won the court medal from the university for biology. She also won the most distinguished student in the School of Science for 2 years running. This girl that thought she was stupid, that people like her didn't go to university. And the reason I know this story so well, and I love telling it, is because this is my wife's story. This is Sheena's story. Sheena grew up in a little place just not far from here called Linwood. And people from Linwood didn't go to university. She was the first person in her family to do that. Now, what does she do? Well, now she's a biology teacher, and she now is a teacher in a school. But actually, she doesn't do much biology anymore, because now what she does, through all of that and the confidence that it brought her, now what she does is actually she looks after the little Sheenas. She looks after all the kids in the school who maybe don't believe in themselves. She does, for those of you in Scotland, she's a principal teacher of support, where basically what she does is now she looks after the children who are maybe just having a bit of a mental wobble, where she gives them a hug, where she makes them a cup of coffee, where she makes them feel better and gets them to believe in themselves. She still does biology, and as she always says, I never want to lose my science. She still loves it. Got to admit, global pandemic and a biology teacher has a double-edged sword, I've got to admit, and a microbiologist. There's parts of it she's loving, and there's parts of it we're not allowed to touch anything. You know, it's that kind of thing. But why I tell you this story is because I'm sure that many of you maybe are still holding on to that. We talked about this the other day. You know, as women in Scottish aquaculture, which is the principal reason that I'm here. I know that it's not all women in the audience, but how many of you are holding yourself back because, well, women can't, people like me can't? My question for you is, number one, where did you learn that? And how amazing would you be if you let that go? I hope that you've enjoyed today. It is a fascinating subject. And if you want a little bit of weekend watching and you've got Disney Plus, please watch Inside Out and sit there and get a box of tissues. It gets a bit sad. And if anything that I've said today is relevant or makes sense to you, please also know, and this is not what this is for, so I'm only going to do it very, very briefly, and I'll speak to Mary and Hazel about it before next week. But I also have 2 books out. One of them called Cracking the Teen Code, which is all about teenagers, and we talk about those 0 to 7, 7 to 14, those Massey Periods, and the other one called Breakthrough, Blueprint for Your Mind. And you'll get both of them on Amazon if you search for my name. And if you want to buy them, they're on Kindle, they're on Prime in the UK, so you can get them very, very quickly if you want to order them. If it's okay, I'll speak to Mary and Hazel, then maybe I'll stick them up next week, and I'll show you what the covers look like, and I'll talk about them a little bit more. But it's not what it's for, just if you are looking for some more information on this, because I know these wee sessions are a little bit quick. And as Hazel's saying, Inside Out is one of our kids' favourites. I love it. I actually have a plan to do a full video on it at some point and break it down and show you what's happening and how it's relevant to us and our mental health. But I hope I've given you some stuff to think about. Maybe over the weekend, what you want to do is you want to have a wee reflection back, have a little look back, and maybe just go back and find that wee you where it all began, and just tell them that it's all going to be okay. In fact, it's all going to be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it just means it's not the end. Love that. Anyway, hello to Jason Isaacs, and see you later. Have a good weekend, everybody. Bye. Thank you to everybody. Have a lovely weekend, everyone. See you all later. Oh, I didn't stop the recording. That would